Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dillon. I'm your host, joined by my blue collar badass, Matt. How's it going, man?
Things are good. Things are very good. We're, in the midst of a very busy construction season, but so far it's been a great year, and weather is not really cooperating this week, but things are still getting done. So it's all fun.
It's since I've not been looking at houses anymore, we decided to hit pause on moving this year. My wife and I were having a conversation yesterday that it feels like just because I'm not in the middle of the whole housing craziness that it like settled down. And she's like, no, it's still still bad. Like she still gets all the updates on houses in our area, and it's still like crazy. Houses sell within like a week or two. It's just still totally insane, which for us, right, in the construction industry is, it's a great economic indicator that things are still going really well for people to be, buying and selling houses so quickly.
Yeah, I like it for that reason. Houses around here are selling before they're even listed. I mean, it's insanity. And my sister and brother-in-law are looking for a house currently, and they were saying they've put in like 10, 15 offers, and they're limiting time now to 15 minutes you get to go view a house. And if you don't make an offer in another 15 minutes, forget it. They won't even talk to you. But they're getting, 15, 20, 30 offers in a day.
So it reminds me of like the countdown timers for like any website that you go to, like in marketing or like the show Storage Wars or something like that, where they've got an auction and it's just an auction now. Like make an offer, if not, you're SOL and come again.
That's exactly what it is. I may have spent some time in a previous life doing the storage auction things, and you want to talk about crazy times, man. When they open up that door, the clock starts ticking. You better either get it or leave.
And yeah, I mean, so it's from a like marketing and psychology perspective, it's great to see that the real estate market finally has like a fear of missing out component associated with it in doing this. And I think it was partially by necessity, right? In COVID and limiting, viewing times and all that kind of stuff for agents, where you can only have one showing versus like a mass hysteria thing of everybody showing up at the same time to view a place. Now it's like you got a slot, best offer, and hope you win.
It is not for the weak of stomach, that's for sure.
Or checkbook.
Yeah, right.
Which kind of goes into, the big topic that we wanted to bring up and go through today. And for construction companies, this is going to be, and really engineering and a whole industry, this is going to be a very different way of looking at your business. This is going to be a new way to think about it. In marketing, it's thought about very frequently in how really people flow through, because you have a lot of data analytics, things like that to track as people move through your funnel or distribution sales channel. And in construction, we just don't have that, right? You've got 5, 10 clients at the most for a lot of it, which is, again, the thing that we also have to remember in construction is there's a lot of marketing things that don't apply, and there's some things that we need to apply very selectively in how we implement them into our businesses for engineering, for construction. Because again, we don't have a lot of clients, so our marketing looks a lot different. It's a very high touch type of marketing efforts. For the most part, there's a lot of, social and other things that are kind of light touch just to keep in front of people. But the thing that I wanted to bring up was it's really looking at it as bottlenecks. And if you've ever read the book, The Goal by Goldratt, he talks about bottlenecks in that book in terms of Boy Scouts. And it's, have you ever read The Goal by
I have
Goldratt?
not. I haven't.
So it's like industrial engineering kind of 101. It's a story of a plant manager, and then he's got like a Boy Scout group that he leads is kind of the, correlation to the story. The plant has a bunch of problems, but he looks at it in terms of bottlenecks. And one of the ways that you could see a bottleneck is you needed the fastest thing or the slowest thing to kind of be up front. So in terms of Boy Scouts, and again, this book was written a while ago, but he put the fat Boy Scout up front so that, he was the slowest one, but then everybody stays together versus if he's in the back, everybody goes, and then you wait, and then you go, and then you wait, go and wait. But when we look at bottlenecks across the organization, it's segmenting, pieces. And the thing that I want to first address is sales. And we've already kind of touched on this. And Matt, I know I want you to jump in on some of this for kind of some of the things that we had talked about last week in just high touch, right? Being yourself, all those types of things in sales. And where in construction, I feel that having a presence online is still not a thing that most people do. So to have that content, put out projects, highlight your people, I think are very key things that we need to be doing as an industry. Again, to bring more people into the industry, but also to show clients, right? It serves two purposes for it. And then, so social's one. And then if you want to touch on some events and things that you've done on in person that really end up making a big difference in how we sell and really the start of everything that we do in kind of casting a vision and all that type of stuff.
So I think you touched on a good point right off the get-go here, in that, we don't as an industry market very well or very often, because most of us, myself especially, we build a handful of projects a year, and that keeps us quite busy. Whether that handful is 5, 10, or 20, it doesn't really matter. It's different if you're selling widgets, right? And you're just trying to boost sales by volume. So any marketing that we do has to be very, very targeted, or it's a giant waste of time. And time is one thing in our industry, especially, that no one has enough of, especially in the springtime when things are running like crazy. So, you really got to target what you do, and you really have to target who you're talking to. The social thing you mentioned, I have started doing that in the last year more frequently, and it's really just to keep our name out there, right? We have a core group of people that are now following along all the silly crap that I put out there, but it's a way to follow up on projects and showcase things. But, for the most part, the marketing we do is like what you said, it's in person. You mentioned events. We don't do a whole lot in terms of career type events where we're getting youth and doing that route, but we certainly do a lot of sponsorships, and this time of year, especially in our market, in the Southeast Michigan market, golf outings are huge. And anytime you can get out with people and start doing actual real face-to-face old school networking, shaking hands, drink a beer or two, hand out those old-fashioned business cards. That's really how deals are done still, in at least here. And that is by far the single best way to get your name out, to stay on top of, or in front of people, stay on top of mind, and to really grow kind of organically, the old school organic way.
And that's one of the things that, and I've worked in a lot of firms. I've, run my own now for a few years, and in the A&E world, I almost feel like we didn't do enough of those types of events, right? We had our 5-10 design clients that we went to, whether that was higher ed or healthcare, or schools are a little harder, like the K-12 market's a little harder to do outings and stuff with. Just now that you can't give anybody more than like $25 or something worth of stuff, the outings become a little more difficult to be a part of. But there's other ways that are free touches that you can do without taking people to lunch and things like that. In other markets, like healthcare and higher ed, and those were no problems. And then obviously with private clients, you kind of do what you want. But in like the public sector has become a little more difficult. If you're doing government or anything like that, it becomes kind of harder, but easier in a way. You just got to be a little more creative in how you play it. But far too often, like there weren't those touches. There weren't those like email campaigns to like best design practices. What do you do for, all these various things that you might have occur within your building? How do you do preventative maintenance on this or that? Like, how helpful would that be to an owner to have those types of follow-ups? And I think far too often we as an industry, because we couldn't. So this is another thing historically. So architects and engineers, but I think architecture historically could not advertise. So in the 70s and sooner, I think 75, it got repealed, or sometime in that time frame. The internet can correct me here, but sometime in that, like before 1975, let's just say, it was unethical to market. Same with lawyers and a lot of professional degrees. It was against your licensure to market. So you weren't able to actually market. It had to be face-to-face, hand-to-hand, and that was it. So now in this new age of kind of, I'll call it the Wild West, but like you could kind of do whatever you want. There's still a lot of old mentality in it, and it works. I mean, it's worked for a long, long time. But there's other things in the design community, especially in the crackdown and or I'm going to say crackdown, but in the public sectors where you can't take people to lunch. You can't gift anything. It's, $25 limit and you still got to write out paperwork for it. Right. So in that type of environment, it becomes very hard to do anything outside of meetings, right? Scheduled things. So you got to be a little more creative for those sectors where you can still take, hospital clients to lunch. Like that's, it's not a big deal, or higher ed, or especially private clients, right? You can do those outings, you can go to those things, and it's totally fine. So it's knowing your market, but also being a little more creative and just consistent in your messaging. You'd be surprised. And the other thing too is that I think a lot of people don't understand or give it enough time is that in construction, right, our timelines are years. So just like you talked about on a previous episode where it took you 6 years for what's going to be your biggest project, how long are people putting in the time of marketing, right, of consistent social effort to then see a return? Because again, like look at your fees on any one of these projects. Guaranteed it's at least 100 grand, if not $1 million, if not 5 or 10 million, depending on what you're doing for a given client. So is the free social media networks and the time and effort you spend to put a post out worth $1 million in a year?
It certainly can be. It all depends on how you play it. And real quick before we get away from it, you brought up the whole taking people to lunch thing. One of my favorite electricians, I was at a meeting at his office, I don't know, about a month ago, and cool guy, kind of quirky, does his own thing. We're starting off the meeting and we're talking about a project, and he goes, oh, hold on a second. He runs in the back room and I can see him, and he's messing around in a freezer, and he comes out with a chicken, frozen chicken, whole chicken. It's huge, biggest chicken I've ever seen. Sets it on the table, and then he sets a couple packages of pork chops, some hot dogs, and something else. And I'm like, what the hell is this? He goes, hear me out. He goes, back in the day, he goes, the only way we could get on your bid list was to take you out to lunch, or you'd forget about us. I said, well, yeah, maybe. I get that. He goes, but how long do you remember that lunch? So I don't know, till I get back to the office, maybe. He goes, exactly. He goes, I give people food that comes off of my farm. He goes, how long are you going to remember the fact that I gave you a friggin' chicken? You got me. I will probably be telling this story for the end of time. So complete sidebar, but I thought it was a pretty neat and unique though, right? And I've told this story now to, I can't tell you how many people. and usually it has his name wrapped up in it. So, there's always creative ways to get your name out there and to stay ahead of the game as far as marketing goes.
That's just it. Tell good stories, be unique, be the person that's remembered, and figure out ways to do that in, that chicken. Frankly, I mean, it's going to be more expensive than anything store bought, but at the end of the day, right, it's worth, like, think of how many bid options or bid lists he's going to be on moving forward because of that damn chicken.
Yeah, I was impressed. And going back to what you were saying with especially with municipal clients, we don't serve a ton of municipal clients, but we do have some, and it's always kind of a tricky thing. Even if it's, get the reasons they put the crackdown in place are real, or they were. So get those out of the picture though. But just something as innocuous as, hey, let's go grab lunch. Now you have to always be thinking about that in the back of your head. Who's going to have a problem with you going to lunch now? Which reporter or which negative Nancy is going to see you having lunch with the mayor or a trustee or something and throw a shit fit over it. And it's absurd, really, that we have to worry about that, but it is definitely a reality.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but there's, again, like, email lists, progress pictures, over delivering on those projects, good word of mouth, because again, those people have probably a pretty good network. So it's, over delivering on your projects, being, above and beyond on what you do. And then it becomes a word of mouth client, but also following up electronically and in a free, free to them type of thing, where like there's no monetary value associated with reports or like just talking well about their buildings or the city or whatever that they're a part of. That's free and goodwill type of advertising.
Yeah, and we, that community center project that I'm always talking about, we market for them quite frequently, and it's a win-win, obviously, if they do better and they talk about us and that goes on the line. But for us, it's for me personally, it's a really cool feeling to drive by that place and see it full of people, or to walk in and see, a bunch of people playing basketball and using it. So there's a lot of community benefit that can come with kind of being strategic in that sense.
Yeah, and again, like, you got to give something to get anything, right? And sometimes, and again, we're talking $1 million fees here. We're not talking $18.95 widget, right? We're not talking about selling a bottle of water. That's not what we're getting at here. This is construction. This is big money, and if you're going to win, you need to be willing to put in the time, the effort, and do it for a long period of time, right? To get that project. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at in payoffs. It's, if you show up for, say, a year, 2 years, I mean, I just tallied up all my views for showing up consistently for the last 2 years, 3 years on LinkedIn. I'm at 500,000 views across LinkedIn. So in that, right, but you got to show up for a long period of time to hit like that type of content and those types of metrics that, again, you got to track them, you got to follow up. And then, at the end of the day, you might not know exactly where it came from, but you can't discount any of the efforts that you've put in along the way.
And, I got to say, you're way better at this than I am. And maybe it's difference in industry, maybe it's difference in personality or both. I don't know. But I mean, I've been doing it semi-regularly for about a year, and I still get excited by the number of thumbs up and likes I get. And that's the only metric I really give a shit about, because the rest of it, again, for me, for what I do, it's not going to sell me a building. It's not going to necessarily produce the next client, but it keeps my name out there, and it hopefully keeps us relevant. Now, in your case, I think it could be the total opposite, right? I mean, you could have that purchase made because of a video you did or something you posted. So, I think it just depends on knowing your target market and knowing how to reach them the best. And there are very different ways in doing that, depending on who you're serving.
And if we look at this as a funnel, right? You look at the good old marketing funnel, and funnels have been around for a while. Russell Brunson he's the king of funnels and click funnels. But when you talk about a funnel, right, you talk about leads, the people that are coming in that are cold audience, that don't know who you are, that don't know anything about you. They need to be educated in what you do, who you are, what you can offer them. And then they become interested. So now they become like qualified in what you do and what you offer. They know who you are. They know your product, but they're not clients yet. They're not people that have bought. So again, it's still an education process, a training process of what you can do, what you can offer them, and building that trust. And this, again, for a bottle of water, a lot of people put in the time and effort to get you to trust that this thing is gonna, not kill you. So depending on where you are in your market, you got to still educate people that you can do what they're looking to do. In construction and engineering, if you're moving from, so a good example is from K-12 to higher ed, right? You've been doing K-12 projects forever, and then you want to get in the higher ed market. Well, you're going to start in the higher ed market or with that client with some really probably crappy projects. You're going to do bathroom renovations. You're going to do simple little whatever, but it's to understand that it's proving that you can work in their environment, meet their standards, and that you're a good person to work with. It might even take a while to get those, $5,000 fee projects to, again, earn the trust to then do the stadium project that earns you a, $1.5 million fee. So understanding where that, value ladder is that Russell Brunson explains, or describes, but it's, escalating a client up. And typically that just means doing bigger and bigger projects for them over a period of time. And that's like the simple piece of the funnel, right? You get cold leads in, you educate them, they become clients, maybe small clients at first, and then, leading into bigger projects with them, doing bigger work for them, and then using that to leverage into other clients. And they, again, know, like, and trust you, and then they just continue to do business with you.
That's it. We could end the show right there. The know, like, and trust, right? The little jobs, we call them resume builders around here. Sometimes you have to do that, but the whole goal in doing that is to build that trust, because in construction, especially, for whatever reason, we still have this connotation globally that the contractor is trying to screw the owner. The architect is trying to screw the owner. Everybody's out to get everyone else. Usually, I think this is pretty unfounded, but it's still there. So to build trust is the absolute key in anything we do. And I think it's probably the same with the design side, with the construction side, even with the owner side. Because frankly, to that end, to the kind of the inverse there, I won't work for someone that I don't trust. If I meet with someone and I think they're kind of a slime ball, and it doesn't do me any good to have a bad project under my belt. That's a headache that doesn't go away for a long time. I worked a long time ago for a guy who would always tell me that the best projects are the ones you walk away from. And I should have it tattooed on my arm, because it's absolutely true. And the times when I didn't trust my gut, and I knew I didn't trust somebody, but I still got engaged with them, it never ends up well. It's never fun. It's, those are the stressful projects that make you not want to do construction anymore. So all across the board, we all need to focus on building that trust, whether it's from the provider or the vendor or the receiver, frankly.
And trust is built in a lot of ways, right? One of the big things is finances. And in construction, money is not talked about enough in how things are structured. And I know I bring it up a lot because I don't think it's heard enough in how things are structured, the transparency, the payment terms, the margins on all of these projects. Let's just get this straight. Everybody in construction's margins suck. They're not good. They're and this is like, so I saw a post on here on LinkedIn where one of the guys that I followed that built a new firm, he came out and said it that a lot of his, so he's a principal owner of an engineering firm, and a lot of his or some of his people said that like they had 50% margins, and it's like not even close to true, right? Like it's most of these firms are operating like if you go and look at AECOM, Jacobs, any of the publicly traded firms, WSP, Stantec, like they're all publicly traded. All their financials are out there. They're not line item, but you get the gist. They're operating on, well, like I think AECOM's like a 1% or half a percent margin. Granted, they do billions, but on a half a percent margin, like that's pretty thin, right? Like in any project, they may or may not make money. So when you look at like a lot of these firms in the financials, like the margins are 1% to 5%, maybe 10%. On some projects, yeah, you might do better, but you need to do a lot of work for the dollar volume to be there. So the margin percentage, frankly, is fairly small. You just have to do a lot of work to make that dollar volume actually matter in terms of, and that's profit. So we're talking straight up profit on the like retained earnings in the company, not like, and that's so that 1% to 5% is after payroll, taxes, insurance, lawsuits, like everything else that comes with construction on all sides of the table. So it's understanding that like margins are thin in finances. And I think that's one transparency that I will continue to hammer on, in that, understanding that building this trust goes a lot of ways, and understanding where everybody stands like financially, I think is very misconstrued. Just because there's a lot of money in it doesn't mean that there's a lot of profit.
If you show me a construction company making 50% margins, I wouldn't believe you. You were doing black magic or something. To get even close to that, forget it. There's so much in this industry that is based on old school ways of thinking, and that's one of them. That the contractor, whether it's a GC or a sub or a vendor supplier, that they're making these obscene numbers and that they're skimming money off of everywhere they can. It's all bullshit, and it doesn't have to be such a hard thing to understand. To your point, that's one of the ways that we win business is we just open up everything and say, here it is. This is exactly what I'm going to make on your project. This is exactly what you're going to pay me. This is what I have to pay my people. And at the end of the day, I'm going to make this little nibble of cheese here at the bottom. So take it or leave it, right? It's going to be this today. It's going to be this tomorrow. It'll be this in 7 months, 8 months, whenever. And maybe more people shouldn't do that because it would make it harder for me. But, just from from overall building trust in the industry, we got to get away from that shit, away from the guys that, will come in at a obscenely low fee on paper and then either just quite literally try and kill their subs or beat everyone to death with change orders just to make it back up to that level of acceptable margin, acceptable profit. We're all out here working. Everybody deserves to make a reasonable amount of money doing what they're doing. We all do way more than we're paid for. And that's part of being good at what you do. But, it gets me infuriated because I know where this stuff comes from and I see it all over the place, but it's such an easy thing to change, or it would be. I think it was easy for me to implement it. It's just honesty, and it's just not being shady, right? It's not difficult.
Yeah, I mean, this was like on a design side, and even on design margins, like they're not that high. Like your people are. I mean, it's fixed everything, right? For engineering firms, you have your people are fixed, your overhead is fixed. You need to pull in that many projects to pay for everybody, to not fire anybody. I mean, and you have typically a very big, nut to crack on a monthly basis to just do payroll, let alone, equipment and software and everything else to do that. And I think, again, financial literacy in general, not just construction, is pretty poor. But then you add in like construction specifics and what are actual margins? Like how much money do we need to like generate in revenue to pay for payroll? Like, let's start there. What's the break even? Especially in like in a design firm when you're staffing a ton of people to do work that may or may not be there, right? And the same with subs, right? Like, I mean, and you guys have your own staff too, but like a lot of subs, I mean, that's somewhat of the benefit of the union, but like still a lot of them, they're employing a big payroll, a lot of people, they've got a big shop space, big overhead that they need to do work just for cash flow purposes to stay in the game. And this, so we're kind of, all right. So the big thing today was bottlenecks. But this is one of those things to educate your people on is financials, financial literacy in your company, and which goes to all your numbers. And really in bottlenecks, finances are such a big one that I cannot emphasize enough, truly, in so many ways. Because again, like, do you know what you pay for a lead? Do you know what you pay to be in front of somebody? Do you know what you pay to acquire that customer? Did it cost you $1,000? Do you even know? Are you, was it $100,000 and your fee was $5,000? Like, what are your numbers to like get in front of that person? And what's the lifetime value of a customer worth to you? And this is the other thing, like when you start talking municipalities, far too often people do the project and they leave. They never talk about it ever again. They don't show up to anything. And then they wonder why they never got the next project for that municipal customer. But if you treated everybody like lifetime value, so what's this municipal district? What's this K-12 school district? What's this higher education client going to do over the next, let's just say 20 years? What does that number look like? In rough terms, right? You're not going to be spot on, but are they going to build 10 million, 100 million, $1 billion worth of construction in 20 years? What's your fee on that? I mean, you can do the math pretty quickly on what that looks like, right? Like this is not that hard, but you need to think of it in very like, what is this customer worth to us if we are to stay in front of them? And again, you can do the initial marketing is going to cost you something. Follow-up is going to cost you something every year to go to events, to do golf outings, to do all that other stuff. There's a lot of free things in marketing, or it costs you $10 a month to be in front of them, or to send an email, or to give them a call, right? It doesn't cost a whole lot. It's a lot of time for sure. But if you're able to then evaluate, okay, this customer over 20 years is going to be $100 million to us, right? That they're going to do $1 billion, $50 million because they're doing $1 billion in construction and we have a 5% fee, right? Very, very straight up easy math is to get 50 million, which no one ever does this math. They don't know their numbers, but to get 50 million, is it worth making a phone call every month to this guy?
Probably should be.
But how often do you not, right? Or does people just don't make the call? But you got to think of it in those terms. What's the value of this customer? Is it worth 50 million to make a call a month? So you're talking 20 years, 240 calls.
It's because of this general illiteracy of finances and that you mentioned, and the cash flow is like a beast that lives down in the basement. And the bigger you get, the hungrier that beast gets. And you have to feed that beast every single day. And people don't recognize what that looks like. I mean, you started touching on some of it between the insurance and the shop or the office and all of the overhead, all of the salaries, all of the cell phones and the laptops. And that beast is hungry, man. And it is a unbelievable amount of food that it eats every single day. And if you don't recognize that and understand it and have a very intrinsic knowledge of what that number is, if you don't look at any other number at all, and we've talked about numbers a lot, but if you look at nothing else, at least know what your cash flow looks like, what your beast has to eat in a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, or you won't be listening to this anymore because you'll be out of the industry. It's as critical as that. And so very few people get into it. I would suggest we try and kind of push it on our employees also. Like, here, you need to know what this costs to do this thing we're doing. At least have a cursory understanding of it, right? It's I can't even stress how critical it is and how scary it is. The first time you see those numbers, it's like, wait, what? What happens if we stop producing? Well, you stop producing and the beast gets really pissed off and bad things happen.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to get cut is salary, right? So if you don't produce, well, I mean, you touched on it. Most employees, again, this I saw a post. Some employee thought that their engineering firm made 50% margins, and it's just like, that's laughable. And I commented, I was like, this financial stuff, it needs to be hammered on far more often. People need to know, because like I remember working for a firm and somebody got all upset that the owners got new cars and they didn't get a raise or something at the end of the year. I'm like, they've owned that firm for 20 years. They probably, their bonus might have been 50 grand or whatever to pay for the car. Yeah, you probably didn't get a bonus. And this person in particular, I was like, I know you didn't do anything above what your job was to, deserve a bonus, let alone like improve the financial bottom line or bring in more work to earn a bonus. Because again, you just did your job. And this is the other thing too that drives me insane. And my younger self was super guilty of this too. But my first job out, my boss actually outlined, hey, you become competent in these 5 things, you'll get a raise. It was a salary raise. And then like I did have to remind him after like 6 months, like, hey, I think I've I've qualified here. But it was actually outlined. And far too often people don't do more, they don't bring in revenue, and they don't understand that like you need to generate revenue in order to get more money. And these are basic things that like the owners deserve. Freaking like, again, it's a new car. Like, you don't know did they finance the whole thing? Did they pay cash for it? It's a $80,000 BMW and their bonus was 50 on a 100 and whatever person engineering firm. I'm sure had 10 million in revenues. Like, like this is somewhat simple math to understand. Like, as an owner of a firm, you're going to get paid more. You took the risk. You own the overhead. And again, if it's 50 grand, like, okay, he made 2/3 of a payment on a car, like, and you're making whatever, 70 grand in the Midwest, which is still like fairly decent. But again, that guy took a lot more risk, or the owners took a lot more risk than you did. And they're responsible for again, a 100-person firm, like just simple things that I think, again, but the owners never conveyed that either. Right. And people just got mad, or a lot of things that should be more transparent in like, but again, it's a privately held firm. They totally don't have to talk about it. They don't want to. It's totally their rights. And I think a lot of people just get lost in these very basic things of, there's 100 people here, like, look around at salaries. I'm pretty sure that, they're probably making 10 million a year to just cover salary, or revenues of 10 million, margins of 5%. So simple math.
I saw the post you're referring to, and I didn't comment on purpose because I would have been the asshole. Like, you're a lot better at being eloquent with that sort of thing, where I tend to just rip the Band-Aid off, and maybe that's the construction guy in me or whatnot, but I don't mess around on a lot of those topics. It pisses me off to no end when people who don't know what the hell they're talking about start running their mouth. I'll just leave it at that. I try not to do it. When I do it, I mean, it happens when I do it and start talking about things. If I don't stop myself, somebody else should, and I'll respect them even more for it.
Yeah, yeah. So again, this whole thing was on bottlenecks, but this creates a lot of problems within the organization, right? If you so in bottlenecks, right? Sales is one of them. Do you have enough to feed the beast, right? Feed the cash flow machine. Can you bring in enough projects? How do you do marketing? How does that top of funnel look like? Then, as you go down, right, what do operations look like? Do you have enough people to fulfill on your projects? Do you have enough money to keep things going and understanding what your finances are? I know we got on a big finance tangent, but this to me is and use well, a big, big deal that not enough people understand. And it could help to, again, bring back top of funnel clients in or to retain the good clients that you have so they can, again, feed the machine, feed the internal workings of your organization, your firm in whatever capacity. Again, you want clients for, this is construction. They're going to build stuff, right? And typically if a client builds one thing, they're going to build a bunch of things over a period of time. So understand, like, we're in the career relationship game. We're not in the sell you a widget today or, sell me this pen. That's not the game we're in. So, all right, top of funnel, finances, operations is, I think, the thing that we'll have the amount of time to cover today, but is getting into operations and making sure that you have enough people for the job that you're doing. You have the right systems in place. And systems are a big thing that we can probably do an episode in and of systems themselves. But when we talk about operations, it's, can you fulfill the project that you've agreed to? And I'll speak on the, the design firm side of this is we commit, or we go and present and try to win as much work as possible. We win more than the people we have. Hire warm bodies because you don't care. You didn't plan for it. You haven't built your culture for it. And it creates all sorts of problems on that side of it. Or on the reverse, you lost a bunch because you didn't know your win rate on proposals and presentations, that you went after bad clients. You didn't, go through a approval process for which projects you're going to go after. You just went after everything. And then you lost a whole bunch because you didn't spend the time on the ones that you should have won. So then you're stuck with not enough projects, scrambling, and you end up firing a bunch of people and then trying it all over again next proposal cycle. So that's typically how the two ways of design firms go, is poor selection process for clients. And then either way, it goes bad. Rarely is it a nice equilibrium.
Construction's not that far off, man. I see this. I've seen it in firms I've worked for, where typically what happens is not that they hire a whole shit ton of people and then have to get rid of them. It's they just never hire anyone, and they try and stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and say, all right, we're going to do 30 million this year with 20 people, and we're going to do 60 million next year with 20 people, and we're going to push 100 the next year with 22 people. It scaling and operational growth. It's a hard one to understand because of the beast in the basement. I get it. I mean, we're at a different scale than some of that, but it's a scary thing to bring new people on, because we want to do it the right way. We want to bring people that fit our culture, bring them kind of up in our systems and our processes, make sure they represent our core values, and then kind of let them loose on the construction world. Well, there's this big catch-22 because, you bring another person on, the beast gets a lot hungrier. So if you're not grabbing more work, you can't sustain to feed them anymore. And like we've talked about before, the worst thing in the world is having to get rid of somebody or lay someone off or, any of that sort of stuff. So, really understanding how your funnel works and knowing your numbers, taking the time to sit down and really map out what kind of manpower do you need to hit the targets you're setting in place. Because if you don't do that, I mean, it's real easy to say, I want to do X million of dollars this year. But if you don't take those next few steps and say, okay, and I'm going to do it with 5 people or 10 people or whatever the number is, you're bound for destruction. You know, you're kind of running with a blindfold on, and eventually you're going to hit something.
You hit on a couple good points there that I want to touch on more. Is one, bringing people into your organization that fit culture, core values, right? One, that's super unique, right? Nobody does that. And then 2 is having training, right? Bringing people within, know your systems, and understanding that that takes time. And the thing in this that I really want to hammer on is that it's an investment. To not see your people as an investment is a big problem. And I think far too many firms see their people as an expense, right? They see it as a line item, as a thing we can't afford. And for sure, there's going to be times where that is absolutely true. But there's also times where, having and bringing people on, they should be able to make you money, right? At the end of the day, those, especially your senior people, your staff that is client facing, if they're not bringing more work in, or if you're not putting them in positions to bring more work in, I mean, that's ultimately on you as a firm owner and an executive to put your people in front of owners, to bring in work, to trust them, but also to explain like the back end, the finances, to be somewhat transparent with them so that they can go in an educated manner to understand the situation instead of like, I'm just doing my job, right? But having no idea that like, oh, we need more work, and ask about that, or have the financial incentives like, oh, you brought something in, cool. Here's our structure financially to reward you for doing so. And again, you need to have those systems as a business owner, as an executive in your firm, in your company. It's going to keep people, it's going to keep them happy. They're going to be part of the process, which again, as we've talked about in culture and core values and all that stuff, like people have to be a part of the process. If they're not, they just don't fit into the company because they don't know where they fit. They don't know where on the totem pole or puzzle piece or however you want to make that metaphor, they don't know where they fit. And that's a big, big problem in a lot of firms. And knowing and telling people, hey, you fit here. This is what you need to do. These are your key metrics. This is what, we're going to measure and judge you by. But most don't have those.
And they have to know where they could go too, right? They have to have some sort of roadmap, and it's different at every firm. On a bigger firm, maybe it's, they move up from PE to a project manager, to a senior project manager, to some down the line. On a smaller firm, maybe it's you do really good and you can become a partner. But they have to, you as the owner have to display that and have to show them very explicitly, this is what our expectations are. And if you perform like we really want you to, here's where you can go. And it's just, it's communication. We've beaten that to death in other episodes, but it's just being open and honest and communicating. It's really simple math, as you say, but it doesn't get done a lot. People don't understand it.
So again, working through like the operational piece of your funnel and fulfilling work, right? Whether that's on the design or the construction side, because that's really what it's operations. And, in far too many design firms, they're not treating it as operations. It's design, right? It's art and fanciful, especially in architecture side of the house. Like they don't treat it as production. And the more that you can treat these as systematized, granted we have milestones, right? Schematic, design documents, construction documents, but the more that you can like, this is how we do it. This is how we go through. This is how we set up everything. This is the detail level that we go on each phase of this project, right? And the more that you can systematize that to where, as Jocko would say, discipline equals freedom, that now once these constraints are in place, you now have a lot more freedom to do other things because you don't have to think about the basics, right? I mean, that's like the beauty of our software is the basics are done. Now it's client facing. Now it's everything else that goes into the project, and all the little stuff gets taken care of. And I think a lot of things can be systematized in, okay, this is how we set up projects. This is how, in the design world, this is how sheets get set up. In the construction world, hey, this is how we phase everything and plan it out. This is how we do scheduling. This is how we estimate projects. And more things like that, there needs to be a system in place for. And again, you're going to have to think, which is going to be the hard part. You're going to have to spend some time to go through this very methodically, figure out what works, and adjust over time to come up with the systems that work for your firm.
Just got to spend the time. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
There was a good quote that I read this morning that thinking, and I don't know if I can find it here, but in thinking, it's one of the things that you become smarter. Those who know that unless we are willing to think, we shall have to work. And the less we think, the more we shall have to work. And the less we shall get for our work.
There you go. That's a pretty good way to close it.
You also want to bring up the podcast, the other podcast giveaway.
Yeah. So if everybody could just take a minute after you're done liking and sharing our podcast with all your friends and associates, hop on over to constructionjunkie.com. I don't think Shane has opened up the voting yet, but he will be very soon for the Best Construction Podcast of the Year awards. We would greatly appreciate the nod if you guys are enjoying any of this that we do. If you're not enjoying what we do, then let us know that too. You can reach us by all of our channels are pretty easy to find. So, like it, share it, let us know what you guys want to hear or what you don't, and we'll keep doing it.
All right, guys, to summarize everything today, and I know we'll cover more of this in other episodes. First, definitely go and rate us number one, and number one. Next is, so again, in funnels, right, you got to go in bottlenecks is figuring out what's the pinch point in your organization, what's slowing you up, what's keeping you from becoming better, right? Whether that's you don't have enough leads, you don't have enough sales, you don't have anybody coming in the top of your funnel. The next is going through down to operations, creating systems, processes to ultimately deliver a project, and then continuing to work with your clients and giving them value, right? What we do is a big value add to not just our clients, but our communities, the world around us. We design and build stuff, right? So everything that you see ultimately is engineered, it's constructed, and it's operated. So we need to do our best to continue to provide value to our owners, our municipalities, our governments, our school systems, everything that we do and serve in our communities. So again, figure out where that pinch point is for you and your growth and what's holding you back from becoming the best organization that you can. And again, constructionjunkie.com, go and rate us number one. And guys, until next time.